Someone walks into a room, they haven't said a word yet, and somehow, by the time they sit down, they already know who's nervous, who's performing, who's actually in charge, and who just wants to be liked. Nobody told them any of this. They read it in about 4 seconds, without appearing to look at anyone at all. How did they already know that about me? You felt that. Standing across from someone who seemed to understand the entire dynamic of a room before they'd contributed a single sentence to it. Here's what's actually happening. Most people walk into a room focused on one channel, themselves. What they're going to say, how they're coming across, whether they look nervous. Cold, calculated people run a second channel simultaneously, and it's aimed entirely outward. While everyone else is managing their own performance, they're quietly cataloging everyone else's. Psychologists call part of this thin slicing, the brain's ability to draw accurate conclusions from a very small window of information, sometimes just seconds, based on posture, tone, micro-expressions, and pacing. Everyone does this unconsciously to some degree. What separates a calculated person isn't that they have some rare gift for it. It's that they've trained it deliberately, the same way an athlete trains a reflex until it stops requiring conscious effort. Most people's thin slicing runs in the background, half noticed, quickly forgotten. Theirs runs at the front of their attention, cataloged and retained. Here's what they're actually scanning for in the first few seconds, before anyone speaks. Who's making eye contact with whom? Because that map tells you who actually holds influence in the room, regardless of job title. Who repositions their body when someone else talks. Leaning in signals investment, leaning back signals detachment or discomfort. Whose voice changes pitch when a certain topic comes up. A flicker most people miss entirely, but a reliable signal of what someone actually cares about versus what they're pretending to care about. None of this requires anyone to say anything revealing out loud. The room reveals itself through posture and rhythm long before conversation starts. This is where a deeper concept comes in, something researchers studying social cognition call status mapping. Every room has an invisible hierarchy that has nothing to do with titles on a door. There's who people defer to without noticing they were deferring. There's who gets interrupted and who doesn't. There's whose jokes land regardless of whether they're actually funny. A calculated person maps this hierarchy almost instantly because they're not listening for content. They're listening for deference patterns. And once they know the real hierarchy of a room, every word they say afterward gets aimed with precision because they already know exactly whose approval actually moves the outcome and whose doesn't. There's something colder underneath this skill, and it's worth naming directly. Most people read a room to feel more comfortable in it, to know where they stand, to avoid embarrassing themselves. A calculated person reads a room to know where the leverage is. The information isn't gathered for comfort, it's gathered for use. This is the line between social awareness and social strategy. One is about fitting in, the other is about knowing exactly which lever moves which person before you've touched any of them. This is also why calculated people rarely look like they're trying. Someone actively working to read a room often looks like they're working, scanning, calculating, visibly processing. A person who's actually mastered this looks relaxed, almost bored, because the analysis has become instinctive rather than effortful. The stillness isn't disengagement, it's bandwidth being spent somewhere invisible to everyone else in the room. Here's the part that should genuinely give you pause. Because this skill is neutral, it can be used to navigate a room with genuine insight and empathy, sensing what people need before they ask for it. Or it can be used to identify exactly which person is most susceptible to influence, which insecurity is easiest to press, which ego is hungriest for validation. The mechanism is identical either way. What changes is only what the person decides to do with the map once they've drawn it, which means the calm, perceptive person quietly reading the room next to you could be building a picture to help everyone in it, or building a picture of exactly how to move each person toward an outcome that benefits only them. This is why calculated people are so hard to catch doing anything wrong until it's already happened. They're never guessing in the moment. By the time they speak, they've already run the room, already know which words will land and which will be dismissed, already know precisely who in the room they don't need to convince because that person was never actually in charge to begin with. So the next time someone stays quiet for the first few minutes of a conversation, watching more than talking, pay attention to what happens after they finally speak. Notice how precisely their words seem to land, how little resistance they meet, how the room shifts in a direction that somehow always ends up favoring them. That precision isn't luck. It's the result of 4 silent seconds most people never even notice happened. How many rooms have you walked into thinking you were unreadable, while someone across from you had already read you completely? If this changed the way you notice the quiet ones in the room, subscribe to MindraftX, because the loudest person rarely holds the real power. Usually, it's whoever spoke last.